So as I've mentioned, the theme for today's event is campus sustainability and the role of the research library. And the presentations we're about to hear will showcase how libraries are designing greener spaces and adopting sustainable practices with the aim of realising the sustainable campus and fostering environmental awareness and action within their communities. I'm really delighted to welcome our first speaker, Michelle Wake, who is Site Libraries Manager and Senior Librarian at UCL School of Pharmacy. And she's going to talk to us about evolving spaces and practices for sustainability.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and I'm delighted to be here as part of RLUK's Space Programme. I do feel I should start off by saying that sustainability in ELCOS, which is UCL's Library, Culture, Collections and Open Science Department, is very much a collective effort. So many colleagues across the department, across the university contribute. So I'm not here necessarily as an expert, but as a representative of a much wider team whom I must thank. So what I'll be quickly covering, I'll give you a little bit of background about UCL and ELCOS's role within it, then some information on UCL's sustainability strategy and how ELCOS is part of that. And part of that includes staff and student engagement and feedback to try and inform and influence. A little bit about a couple of new builds we've had recently and some refurbishments that we're having this summer. And also what I'm calling improvements, which are kind of the day-to-day things that we do. Obviously, we can't always be having new builds or large refurbishments. And then very quickly, a little bit about challenges and future plans. So UCL was founded in 1826. So we're celebrating our bicentenary next year, which partly explains why we've got a lot of refurbishments happening this summer, as next summer we won't have to think major while the celebrations are going on. We're a large multidisciplinary university, highly rated for our research, over 18,000 staff and over 51,000 students from over 150 different countries. In terms of ELCOS, we're a department of just around 440 staff. We have 14 libraries, the Student Centre, which provides study spaces, but not physical collections. We have special collections, 3 museums and other allied object collections, and a store at Wickford in Essex. And there's also UCL Press and the UCL Office for Open Science and Scholarship. And we're spread across London, and the buildings that we're in range from historic buildings to new builds. So UCL's current sustainability strategy is actually coming to an end. We have a new one coming out later this year. But to give you some idea about what it has involved, I've put up here the 6 headline commitments from 2024, which were quite ambitious. Every student to be involved in sustainability, that will increase our sustainability research. Our institution to be net zero carbon by 2030. We think with the new strategy coming out, that date will be pushed back a little bit. To be a single-use plastic-free campus, to reduce waste per person by 20% and create more biodiverse green space on campus. Now, UCL has made some progress with some of these. All of its strategy is based on the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm sure many of you will know, that are around climate change, poverty, inequality, and economics. But I thought I'd just put the slide up there as a reminder. Now, on this next slide here, you can see how ELCOS support links into UCL's 3 main principles when it comes to sustainability. So they're about inspiring action, being run sustainably, and how we shape the debate. And the first one I'll talk about a little bit is staff and student engagement and feedback. So when it comes to this, ELCOS does have a staff sustainability committee. We've got representatives from across all our sites and all grades. And one of our key initiatives is to take part in UCL's Green Impact Scheme. Now, this scheme was devised by the education charity Students Organising for Sustainability UK. I think in total there's about 2,000 organisations internationally involved with this. In 23-24, we had 18 LCOS teams take part, 12 of whom achieved gold. This year, we've got 19 teams taking part. The museums are coming in with us for the first time, and we should know the results of the awards in a ceremony on the 9th of July. So we've got our fingers and toes crossed for that. And in terms of these awards, these depend on how many criteria of a toolkit that you complete. And they range from criteria that's about promoting awareness of sustainability to very practical criteria, such as providing recycling bins. And these toolkits are audited by a group of UCL student volunteers, and they do that with you face to face and have a walk around your site. And as part of that, we also welcomed 10 student sustainability ambassadors this year into LCOS. They're volunteers, certain number of hours a year they can do for us, and they've worked with us on various projects. I've had a group or two ladies looking at investigating recycling versus extending warranties on PCs and laptops. I should have that report very shortly. We also tried to include sustainability information in our library student inductions, and all new LCOS staff job descriptions have a line about sustainability as well. And indeed, all the UCL staff have to do a short mandatory online course on sustainability, which we have to repeat every 3 years. And like lots of you, our department organises, or we host, a variety of activities, things such as clothes swaps, seed swaps, book swaps, and nature walks, which are very popular. And indeed, I think as libraries and also our museums, through our collections, our exhibitions and our displays, and our information literacy programmes, we do provide inclusive access, of course, to teaching and research resources on sustainability. As a department, we're heavily involved in open access and open science. And of note is our open access press, which publishes a number of titles on sustainability, including the journal UCL Open Environment. So moving on to some of our new build projects, we've had a couple in recent years. The first that I'm highlighting is the UCL Student Centre, which opened in 2019. That was a cost of 67 million. And certainly when it was built, I think even now, it was one of the most environmentally advanced buildings in the UK university sector. To tell you a little bit about it, it has a variety of study spaces, just under 1,000 study spaces across 8 floors. Large areas of these floors have been designed so that they can be easily reconfigurable in the future. Some of the spaces do have PCs, but all the study points have electrics and laptops can be loaned. We have a cafe, there's food and drink vending machines throughout, water fountains, and a kitchenette for customers as well. There's a number of showers, lots of lockers, and also in this building, we have a prayer room, a meditation room, and UCL's student wellbeing services also work out of the centre. The building did achieve a BREEAM outstanding rating, so that's the highest sustainability certification in the UK. And that's partly because it was constructed using low carbon concrete, and it does follow a passive first design approach. So as you'd expect, high insulation, air tightness, energy efficient glazing, and automated windows. And it's had special water fittings installed so that we're using 50% less water than a building of comparable size and use. We've got a ground source heat pump and solar panels on the roof, which I think is 250 square meters of solar panels that also go across our theatre, which is the next building. And as you can see on the slide, the centre also has a green sedum roof with a nice seating terrace, and at ground level, we have a Japanese garden. The second new build I'm going to mention is the Marshgate building, which is at our UCL East campus in the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in Stratford. It opened in 2023. It's UCL's largest building. It's over 8 levels, with the library part of one of these levels. The library there has around 150 study spaces. The library doesn't actually house print collections, but students can request materials from other libraries. And part of the reason for that is, particularly at UCL East, the majority, in fact, all the courses are multidisciplinary. This building also achieved a BREEAM outstanding rating. During its construction, one of the main things was that they looked at minimizing waste. It's an energy smart building, lots of LED lighting, high efficiency ventilation, and it's also got smart systems, which I can't begin to understand, that monitor and optimize energy use in real time in this building. They also harvest rainwater for non-drinking uses. And in the basement level, there's secure cycle storage to help with transportation. The library itself, and there's a couple of pictures of the library here, it's very much flooded with natural light, a variety of different types of study spaces, and uses lots of natural sustainable materials, including, which actually was installed only a few weeks ago, acoustic panels that are made of natural moss, and it's live moss, and there's a picture of that there. Now, clearly, I think these new builds for us can be very inspirational, but what about the spaces in our older buildings? Well, we've got a number of refurbishments happening this summer, and they're overseen by our LCOS Estates and Projects team, who's led by Becky Bashan, working with UCL Estates, contractors, and of course, library managers. I'm only going to highlight this one at the moment, the Institute of Education. This is one of our largest. This refurbishment is just over 1.2 million, and it's a bit of a refresh for us at the Institute of Education Library. The site manager there is Brian Johnson, and the subject liaison coordinator is Dan O'Connor, and they've very much been the leads on this. They've put a lot of work in here. The library itself, you can see a picture of it on the left-hand side, is a purpose-built extension that's across 3 floors. It opened in 1993, and it was designed to blend in with the rest of the institute, which is a brutalist architecture. It was built in the 70s. So as you can see, it is very much a large concrete and glass box, which can have its issues in terms of temperature. The library currently has just under 400 spaces. Again, these are in individual, group, and social. But some issues we've been having is that firstly, this library is one of the busiest in UCL. It frequently reaches full capacity. And it has been starting to look a little bit tired. And acoustically, there've also been lots of, some issues around noise transference between noisy and quiet areas. And also electrics to the desks have been quite limited. So the project that we're doing, it's looking to add an additional 165 study spaces. This is just, you can guess, just one of the floors here. So 165 extra spaces, also going to upgrade the electrical provision. And they're able to do this because shelving is being removed. Or not all of it, I hasten to add. The IOE team undertook what is very much a significant weeding project over the past year. And that involved weeding or relocating 1.5 kilometres of books and journals. So that was a significant change across the collections on site, but the rate of reduction was very carefully managed by the team there to reflect usage patterns and the integrity of these important collections. And after this refurbishment, the library will still have 2.5 kilometres of shelving on site. We're going to be here enhancing the different types of study spaces, including 6 new bookable soundproof glass pods and one that's fully accessible. Height adjustable desks, the number's going to be increased. And with the help of the UCL accessibility team, we're having one area, one of which is on this floor, which will be a calm sensory area. And on another floor, we will have a more vibrant sensory area. We're going to have new display cabinets installed so that we can make the collections even more visible. And there'll be new energy efficient lighting. And having mentioned about sometimes the heat and coolness problems in this site, we've got thermal blinds coming in as well. And we're going to try and green the space with even more plants than it has now. And we'll be retaining the existing water fountain. The existing shelving, much of the furniture is going to be reused in the library. The works here started 2 weeks ago, so you can still see some of it here in progress. So we're going to say try and reuse some of the furniture and the shelving. Some of it will be relocated or reorientated to try and create some new look spaces and help improve zoning. And for new furniture that we will buy, UCL does work with suppliers who encourage sustainable practices. Okay, so again, refurbishment is all very nice, but they're not frequent events. So day to day, we do try to make enhancements to our spaces. So just to quickly give you some examples, we have been retrofitting energy efficient lighting into some of our sites. We have specialist UV window films installed in some areas to help control temperatures. Those have already gone into the Institute of Education. We promote switch off campaigns for lights, equipment and heating. And as a department, we've signed up to UCL's Powered by Plants pledge, which is about making our catering vegetarian and vegan by default, so you can opt in to meet if necessary. And we advertise our nearest water fountains by various methods. And some of our sites also provide free sustainable period products in their facilities. In terms of travel and transport, we use UCL's electric vans to move items around Bloomsbury and UCL East. And we try to save our customers unnecessary travel by using real-time study availability information online. We have sensors underneath our study desks, which is obviously the point of those is to tell people where they've got free spaces, but it also gives us useful information about what seats are used first. And perhaps not surprisingly, we often find, for example, those are the seats nearest the windows, which again helps us with all our planning of new spaces. I won't say too much here about responsible procurement, other than to say that we try to have robust collection management policies, aiming at most of us, of course, to ensure the only resources that we're purchasing or receive as donations or digitized and stored are those that are actually needed. And we do have an e-first purchasing policy when it comes to books and journals. Moving on to recycling and disposal, unwanted printed materials, particularly our books, are either sold with contribution going to charity, or they're recycled. And we use a company, I'm sure lots of you use, the book Rescuers. We try to recycle our packaging as much as possible, and there are collection points around campus. And we also recycle our IT equipment. Our LCOS IT team, with help of Central UCL IT, in the last year alone have recycled 166 pieces of IT equipment. As I've mentioned, we do repurpose furniture or refurbish it. If we can't do that, we advertise it via reuse sites such as Warpit. And to give an example, on this slide, you can see a picture of an archive display cabinet at the School of Pharmacy. And that came from another site that we used to have in Senate House, University of London. And this summer alone, we're going to be refurbishing 135 chairs from the School of Pharmacy Library and also the Science Library. And again, I think my last point on this slide is what lots of you will do. Our printers across the campus actually are set as default to double-sided printing, and the paper that we use is from 100% recycled content. Okay, moving on to biodiversity. We have greened some of our offices and public places with houseplants. I must put a shout out here to the Institute of Archaeology Library, which has led the way here with this and helped lots of us follow suit. The School of Pharmacy propagated plants to give away as student prizes. during an induction session where we were getting them to actually walk the floor to learn various things about the space. And our Wickford store in Essex even has a vegetable garden, and they've actually had vegetable competitions. I've mentioned here the Grant Museum of Zoology. That reopened in 2024 after a £300,000 refurbishment. And as a result of that, they've got new refurbished displays that highlight biodiversity, conservation, and climate change. And recently, our museums have been holding a variety of public, including family events. There are interactive art workshops that have been inspired by the herds. Now, that's an international initiative highlighting climate change. And the herd is actually a procession of life-size puppet animals that's it's been going around the world, and it arrives in London on the 27th of June before going on to Manchester. So do take a look out for that. When it comes to inclusive and accessible spaces, like all of us, clearly we aim to provide welcoming spaces for all. And we do that with a range of different spaces, assistive technologies and support, some of which I have listed on the slide. Okay. Then moving on to some of the challenges that we've had, which I'm sure you'll all recognise. The first is of cost, especially when it comes to retrofitting. For example, the School of Pharmacy Library, which, to give you an idea of its size, is about 70 seats. The cost of putting in new energy efficient lighting, we were quoted 80,000. So we weren't able to do it last year, but we're hoping that we might be able to do that within the next 2 years. Engaging diverse stakeholders who can have different priorities, especially sometimes when it comes to cost. Especially as the majority of our libraries and museums, we're actually in faculty buildings. We share space with lots of other departments. Also, some of our libraries are in NHS hospitals as well, so we have to consider that. Yeah, definitely retrofitting historic, listed or older buildings, which can be more difficult. And services that are not under your direct control. So, for example, the heating system at the Institute of Education is actually in the School of Oriental and African Studies, and that college isn't part of UCL, so it's a different institution. Must be something historical. Also changing long-standing habits and systems, balancing our digital growth with our energy use, and measuring our impact, particularly carbon, in a meaningful and transparent ways. And finally, of course, greenwashing. So in terms of our future plans, we've made some progress in LCOS, but of course, as all of us, there's always so much more to do, so much more to learn, which is a continuous process. Over the next 2 years, we're aiming to devise and deliver part of a comprehensive, very specific sustainability plan, document our current sustainable practices and those of our suppliers, and try and influence our suppliers where we can, working with our colleagues in other libraries to do this, other institutions. Track emerging good practice from the sector, so it's why we're very interested to be with this event, and look at developing further mitigations for our digital carbon footprint. And finally, I've mentioned here, when it comes to printed books, LCOS staff, I think it's Ros Evans here who's heavily involved, I'm a part of the RLUK initiative to establish the United Kingdom Print Book Collection, the UKPBC. So that's the collaborative effort by UK higher education, national and specialist libraries to preserve printed books while freeing up shelf space. So to finish, LCOS is evolving to support a more sustainable future. And I do think even small changes can make a difference. And we do have the opportunity to influence our communities given our central role within our institutions. So thank you for listening. And I will now hand back to the chair.
So thank you again, Michelle. We're going to hand over now to our second speaker, Olivia Woolsby, Head of Teaching Collections at the University of Manchester Library, who's going to talk to us about a really exciting project to put a green space at the heart of the library.
Okay, so My name's Olivia Walsby. I'm Head of Teaching Collections at University of Manchester Library, and I'm also the leadership team lead for Spaces Governance, and also I chair our Environmental Sustainability Steering Group as well. So, first of all, before I sort of come on to the main part of the presentation, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we manage our spaces at University of Manchester Library. So I say I lead for, I'm a co-lead for Spaces Governance with another member of our leadership team. And we run a Spaces Governance group, which is made up of members from our library exec team, myself and my colleague from leadership team. And we look after agreeing annual budget submissions and prioritising our budget for spaces and spaces developments for the coming year. We also manage strategic liaison with our estates colleagues. And also we're there as a consultative body to work with our leadership team, our exec team, and also the library wider library as well. So today, to start with, I'm going to just trying to see if I can hide this thing in the corner because I can't see my notes at the moment because it's covered by other things. So just 1 second, if you just bear with me. Right, got it. So yeah, first of all, I wanted to talk more broadly today at the beginning about sustainability in its broadest sense. So really thinking about creating spaces that meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs so that they can be maintained over time without depleting resource or causing harm to the environment. So to give some context here at University of Manchester Library, we have Main Library Redefined, which is part of our I2030 strategic vision. This is essentially looking to make our current building, so our current main library, more sustainable, to give it new life, really, in order to be able to deliver world-class, world-leading environment for research, learning, student development, and engagement with our print and our digital collections. So the overarching project is aiming to consider the total student and staff body and the experience for them in the library, in our learning spaces, supporting services in line with scholarship, new technologies, shared service cultures, and then more importantly, the importance of well-being on campus and obviously of social responsibility as well. So pending any significant funding for a complete redevelopment and extension to our main library building, we're pursuing a series of transformational projects over the next few years designed to enhance the student experience and address some long-standing issues we also have with our main library building. So whilst we've made some small improvements over the past few years in terms of our study spaces, so this has been things like updating furniture, we've converted some of our staff offices into additional study space. But other than that, we're now moving on to some significant changes and have some major projects for redeveloping the building going on over Main Library this summer. So this is a mixture of improvements to long-standing problems, as I said before, but also taking advantage of the availability of funds and capacity and resource from wider campus estates projects as well. So the first of these is a refurbishment of our toilets, which is very much needed. So this is going to include the addition of more female, accessible and all gender toilets. We're also looking to replace and upgrade our entry gates, which is actually in our Learning Commons building. And we've taken the advantage there as well to, whilst we're refurbishing and replacing them, to make sure that they're all fully accessible as well. So an improvement from accessibility perspective. And this is a lead into the fact we will also be replacing our main library gates next year as well. So this is the first stage of those gates redevelopments. The third is a redevelopment of our library cafe space. So this is funded centrally again and developed in partnership with colleagues from our Students' Union. And then we have a library-led initiative, which we're funding ourselves, where we've seen a real opportunity to make a difference to the library building as a whole. And this is the redevelopment of what is known as our mural stop centre and central courtyard. So this is actually going to be the focus of my presentation today, with an eye on environmental sustainability more specifically. So back to the title of my presentation, which was creating a green space at the heart of our building. So just before I come on to talk in more detail about that actual project, the other thing I just wanted to show or share with you really was our library spaces statement that underpins our approach to all library space development projects. And I'm not going to read it through, you can see it on the screen, you can have a look through yourselves, but it's just to point out that obviously for us, environmental sustainability is a key aspect of this, along with accessibility and inclusion, in terms of what we think about when we start to develop any of our spaces, and the fact that we want to work centrally with university teams to make sure that we're doing that the best way possible and to find expertise there as needed. And I'll come back to some of this and how we're working through or taking this approach as I talk through the project itself. So onto the detail of the redevelopment project. So this was born from a recognition that we had a significant but highly underutilised space in our main library building. And it presented a real opportunity to respond to some recent student feedback we'd had on some of the things that they were looking for that perhaps we were not providing enough of or we weren't providing at all. So initially the focus was on the internal study space only, but it quickly became obvious that the redevelopment of the external courtyard would allow us to do something really transformational for the library building as a whole. The Mural Start Centre opened originally in 1978 and was built as a conference centre, but it's had a few different uses over the years. It housed our Institute for Development Policy Management at one point, the centre for that and the stock that went with that. And then more broadly as a study space over the past 15 years. At one time it was dedicated PGR space, but more recently it's just been bookable study spaces for all library users. However, as I said, in more recent years, it's been a space that's been really underutilised, and the internal design and furniture is really not fit for purpose anymore. It's cold and dark and a bit uninviting. As you can see from some of the images on the slide, it's very dated, and essentially it's a bit, say, worn and dated. The outside space is pretty overgrown. It's not being looked after properly, a bit uncared for, and covered in sort of grey concrete slabs, a bit uninviting. And not really usable as a space for our library users, other than unfortunately a place where people go and secretly try and smoke and vape, as you can see from the signs we've got on the pictures there, which is not what we want. So just before I go on to some of the detail and some of the environmental stuff that we've looked at in terms of the project, I thought it might be helpful to outline how the structure of the University Library, the main library at University of Manchester. So it's a combination of the original 1930s building. Then there was a 1950s extension. Then the Mural Start Centre was built in the middle of this sort of C shape in the 1970s. And then finally, the large section of the building now of our main library, which includes our main entrance that we use now, was built in the 1980s. Although it was designed in the 60s and 70s, and I understand that although it wasn't built to the 80s, the design stayed the same. It just took that long to get funding to actually build it. So it's a sort of fairly 70s style building. So as you can see from the architectural image on the right and the bird's eye view on the left of the slide, the centre and courtyard sits at the centre of those three combined buildings, with the entrance from our main library, main entrance in the 80s part, crossing the courtyard into the Mural Start Centre itself. So we recognise that this was a missed opportunity in terms of the outside space is really accessible from our main thoroughfare and through our blue ground floor and through the main entrance. And also, as the central courtyard to this sort of building surrounding it, it's actually viewable from nearly all areas of our library building. And the final bit was that we don't have any other outside space for the library other than out the front of the library, and certainly not outside study space. And this is something that students have flagged they would like to see more of. So that was an inspiration for this. So the proposal we came up with was the outcome of a consultation with the student union representatives. We held workshops with our library staff. We had used also extensive feedback and data that we held in terms of the usage of our different spaces within the library, as well as carrying out a targeted survey for those students who currently use the space as it was. We also carried out an equality impact assessment to consider any mitigations needed against any negative impacts this might have for any of our user groups, and also to look for opportunities to create positive impact. So as a result, the project aimed to deliver to all our library users, meeting intersectional needs across different user groups through additional and enhanced provision in the form of an improved reading room that is in keeping with the aesthetic of the building, so including a good standard of flooring, redecoration, heating, lighting, sufficient power and IT provision, etc. Bookable individual silent study spaces, enhanced well-being through carefully designed spaces. So this was looking at outdoor all-weather study spaces to bring nature and greenery. A calm indoor study space, which was optimising natural lights and with the provision of ambient task lighting. So that's adjustable to meet multiple functions and varying sensory needs as well. So looking to support neurodivergent library users. And again, an aim to bring nature and the outside into the study space as well. and also improvements in terms of accessibility, particularly to our doors and access doors, and also the layout of the space. So feedback and research had all pointed towards the need to develop a space inspired by and grounded in nature, with well-being as a focus. So we set out working closely with our estates colleague to create a green space at the heart of the library. So here I'm going to come on to talk about maybe one of the more challenging elements of the project, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, which was funding. So when we initially got plans and costings back from our colleagues in estates, from what we realised that in order to achieve anything near what we wanted to, we would be need to look very carefully at funding. In particular, a challenge which, again, I know many of you will face similarly when redeveloping your own buildings, is that of the initial budget that we had earmarked would be subsumed in making good just the current space in terms of delivering basic upgrades to the flooring, heating, decoration, the lighting, etc., before we could even come on to looking at creating something exciting and transformational as we'd wanted to. So we decided to use some of this as an opportunity. A challenge and an opportunity always come together. And so we worked with estates colleagues to identify funds from across other campus projects, and in particular working with our university environmental sustainability group to not only cover some of the basic refurbishment needs, but also to bring benefits which met with our targets of improving spaces from an environmental perspective. So as such, we've covered the replacement of all the windows of the study centre. We're using central funds used to reduce CO2 emissions around campus through improved insulation and ventilation. And ultimately, pulling together funding has been a challenge. So we had that funding centrally, but we've also had to use 2 years' worth of budget that we have set aside for space development and furniture, as well as drawing down on some of our interest on a library endowment fund that we have as well. But in terms of other efforts towards a more sustainable refurbishment, one big thing was that we had chosen to reuse the current fabric of the building rather than a new rebuilding, which brings significant environmental gains. But other positive decisions for sustainability and benefits that we plan to deliver are internally in the study space, we're reusing existing IT equipment. Furniture-wise, we're using, where possible, natural and sustainable materials, and we're sourcing our desks and chairs from a local supplier. From the windows, as I say, we're improving insulation, air quality, and reducing CO2 emissions. And with the lighting, we're going for pre-settings that are going to reduce electricity use as well. For the internal space, we've commissioned a unique sculpture. You can see this on the slide. So this idea of this is to complement the building's architecture, but also to bring, again, some greenery inside for a calming effect. So for this, we're working with a local city centre-based company to create the structure of the piece, and then with our local plant suppliers to create an open terrarium as such in the centre. As you can see from the screen, hopefully be something quite striking in the middle, but also bring that greenery in for the experience of our users. We'll also be using the walls to display backlit copies of nature-themed artwork from our special collections, and we held a competition, so our staff voted on which images to choose for that as well. Then in the courtyard, we'll be introducing a variety of plants to encourage wildlife and create a tranquil green study space with various seating options throughout. And you've got some of the images of the designs that we've been looking at for that there. We've kept trees where possible because there was some planting out there. There was a lot of grey paving. There was some greenery and planting out there. So we've kept any trees where possible. Some have had to be removed due to potential structural damage from their overgrown roots. But where that's the case, we've worked with the university's environmental sustainability team to protect existing trees as much as possible, as say, and then to replant trees elsewhere on campus where we have had to remove them. That's in line with the university's tree planting policy. Wood chips from the removed trees and shrubs will form mulch and be distributed across campus to suppress weeds and support other development projects. In terms of external lighting, this is being kept to a minimum to reduce any adverse impact on wildlife. We're using natural wood in our external furniture to reduce the need for staining, lacquering, and ongoing maintenance there. The courtyard itself had actually got quite a lot of old furniture and bits and pieces that we needed to dispose of. So we've worked with Accrington Climate Action Volunteer Group, which is a joint student and local resident allotment activity. And they've taken away some of the spare compost tools and furniture we had there. So that's great to see that being reused. And this space joins our space within the library, does join a number of recent green space developments across our campus, such as the image on the slide, which is of our old quad, which has been at an amazing redevelopment recently. I think it was last summer. And this includes, on the right-hand side, examples of how we might plan to use our own garden space to attract wildlife. So the introduction of things like log piles, insect houses, etc., to really help make sure it's a biodiverse environment. So that was a short overview of that particular project and how we're approaching our spaces developments in terms of focus on sustainability. What we're hoping to achieve is a beautiful green space at the heart of the building that's viewable from as many areas of the library as possible, to bring that sense of calm and well-being, not to just those directly using the space, but also to those working at any of the many windows that say look over of that part of the building. I'll finish by talking a bit more generally about our approach here at the library in Manchester to embedding environmental sustainability thinking and action within our library. So environmental sustainability is a key focus for the university's social responsibility and civic engagement plan. And each professional services directorate, which includes the library, has committed to creating their own environmental sustainability action plan. So about a year and a half ago, we formed a steering group to work through this. So we're responsible for mobilising the library's environmental sustainability action plan, empowering library staff to take ownership of the action plan via our directorate management teams. We're looking at embedding environmental thinking and action across our library, encouraging and supporting grassroots action by engaging all our staff in environmental activities and through our recently established environmental sustainability working group. So priorities for us over the past year have been sustainable procurement practices, sustainable changes to spaces and buildings, promoting sustainable travel, and then managing waste sustainably, including recycling and responsible disposal. So I mentioned previously that we've built it into our spaces approach statement, that we make sure we are always making environmental considerations in our buildings projects. But this is articulated more specifically in our action plan with a number of actions directly related. So in terms of any spaces government's work where working with estates to explore alternative sustainable options for the existing library building as part of ongoing main library redevelopment projects. We're making sure we're always doing that. An environmental sustainability officer is a requirement for any of our major buildings projects. This is provided via our estates team for any large capital projects. However, we're also insisting that we liaise with ES colleagues, environmental sustainability colleagues, as a priority for all of our projects, whatever the scale. All new major space refurbishments will ensure that we have timer lightings with sensors incorporated into the project. We have a spaces coordinator who's making sure that we're adopting any new initiatives that are going on across campus that are reducing environmental impact. And we welcome any infrastructural change that we can to reduce our carbon footprint. So an example of this would be working with the electrical services unit to install new light bulbs in our buildings to make sure they're energy saver where possible. We're also reviewing the provision of drinking water from our machines with the aim of moving to a fully plumbed system with any significant building upgrade that we have. But in the meantime, we're also looking at testing options for the addition of timer settings on those machines to look at bringing significant savings in CO2 there. We're also modernising our electrical distribution boards. Each action in our action plan is mapped against an emissions reduction lever. An example of one of these might be so that one would be to reduce waste, one might be on policy or strategy change, one might be on local sourcing or supply chain efficiencies. And these are helping us to identify measures that we can put against each of the actions, which is allowing us then to report progress against the action plan and ensure we are able to fully realise what our contributions to the university efforts have been. So beyond sustainable spaces, we've been rethinking our procurement processes. So this has been a key focus in terms of relationships with our book suppliers, and we've flagged our action plan with our main suppliers and added it as a lead agenda item for our meetings with those suppliers, asking them to sign up to the Net Positives Futures platform, and also highlighting that we'll be monitoring their progress on the commitments they make within that as well. We've also implemented a policy to use only fair trade products in all our staff kitchens. In terms of encouraging more sustainable travel, we follow university guidance on this, and we have therefore a rail first approach for travel within the UK and Europe. But to support our own staff's travel more actively by bike and foot to work, we've updated our staff showers and changing facilities, another spaces project that we looked at. We've also continued to use our e-van and e-bike for movement across and between library sites, and we're working with our estates colleagues to hopefully install an electrical charging point at our main library to support this over the coming year. Most recently, we've established the Environmental Sustainability Working Group, and they've arranged an active travel breakfast for library staff. So this included offering a free breakfast at our sustainable and vegetarian museum cafe to encourage staff to use active travel to commute. And we've also, for that event, they arranged a bike mechanic to come along and to offer free bike services and minor repairs as well. In terms of reducing packaging and deliveries to the library, our digital IT team worked very closely with their suppliers to look at making sure that we're embedding new standard terms of business, and this has been actually brought in centrally to the university now, specifically around expectations on packaging. But we've also agreed to reduce the number of deliveries from our suppliers, so challenging next day delivery models, which has been a bit of a default for many years. Over the coming year, our focus is now going to be on staff awareness and training, with plans to roll out carbon literacy training across the library. So obviously, before I thank you for listening, I just want to say, as those of you who've been involved in any significant space redevelopments or toilet refurbs in particular, I'm sure you'll appreciate projects like these are full of challenges, from shifting contractor programmes to works and schedules, to last minute changes in access routes and the consequent impact on services being offered. So I would say, please feel free to get in touch with me if you're interested in any more details on anything I've talked or covered today. But you might want to wait until September or maybe October to get a better story once we're out the other side of all of these bits of work. I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but roll on September and Welcome Week, when hopefully all of these projects will be completed and we'll have lots of lovely new spaces, and particularly an opportunity I'm looking forward to sitting in our lovely new green space to recover from it all. So thank you for listening.
So talking of carbon literacy, which Olivia just did, I am now very pleased to welcome our final speakers, which is Sigrun Wagner, Professor in International Business and Sustainability, and Maria Fardaki, Library Administration Manager and Higher Education Researcher at the Business School. Both are from Royal Holloway at the University of London. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I'll just introduce myself while Maria is getting the slides up. Thank you for having me as a non-librarian. I do have glasses. I own some cardigans. I don't have a cat, but I do like a quiet space. So I hope that gives us a connection. We're here to talk about carbon literacy training and the role of the library in that. So we'll introduce it more generally, then we'll talk about how it's run at Royal Holloway, and then Maria will talk about carbon literacy at the library and what has come out of it. So if you go to the next slide, so carbon literacy so nicely links to our previous speaker, Olivia. It originated in Manchester and really follows the wide success in the television and film industry. You might have come across the Albert Awards, and Manchester makes it a fitting place to originate the Carbon Literacy Project, which came through Cooler Projects, which is an organisation to work for low carbon solutions. We could argue that Manchester was one of the places that kick-started the Industrial Revolution, and in fact the first offices of Cooler Projects was not very far away from where Richard Arkwright first connected a loom to machinery powered fossil fuels, which really started the mechanization of industry. Now, what is carbon literacy? If you go to the next slide, if you click through, Maria, it's very much about developing an awareness. What are the costs and impacts of our everyday activities, and then working on the ability and the motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, a community and organizational basis. So for example, if you go to the supermarket, you will know the costs of orange juice versus champagne, or beef versus chicken, or tea versus coffee. And so in the carbon literacy training, the focus is, what are the carbon dioxide costs? What are the costs on the climate of our everyday activities? And what I like about the training is that it's very much about empowering participants to choose their own climate solutions. So if you click a couple more times, Maria, we get the whole slide. And so we're really keen not to tell people what to do. So for example, our students who walk, cycle, take the train, we won't tell them to get an electric vehicle. That's not appropriate. Or our early careers researchers, if they're renting, we won't tell them to get solar power on their solar panels on their roofs. It's very much, what is that you can do. So we're focusing on the solutions while also covering the issue and the problem. And in order to get the certificate, the carbon literacy standard requires 1 day of training, a day's worth of carbon literacy training to get the certificate. And since we started offering the training at Royal Holloway 4 years ago, the number of people certified across the carbon literacy has really gone up. So it was 16,000 citizens certified when I first started, and we've now reached 130 citizens. And what I'd like to highlight here is also the sectors and the toolkits and how many organizations have engaged in carbon literacy training. And you can see also the number of different courses that have been designed. So there's a tailoring to the audience, and the importance of local learning is very much stressed in carbon literacy training. And the result is about 5 to 15% of carbon savings per person. And speaking more about the toolkits, these are very much developed and curated for the purpose of offering carbon literacy training, if we go to the next slide, Maria, for specific sectoral audiences. And so it's very much matched to what the sector does and what the sector needs. And it also helps to the sector to adopt carbon literacy training. So it really takes out that time and the cost of developing and crediting the courses that are often a barrier to adoption. Initially, there were 5 public sector courses, and these are free to use under Creative Commons license, and that's what we're using for higher education. There are 2 carbon literacy courses, one developed by Manchester Met University and one by Nottingham Trent University. And you've got all of these other public sectors courses. And then in addition, toolkits are constantly being developed for the private sector. So as you can see, some are in progress, some have already been done. So I'm currently in conversation with our external engagement team to offer with our local Chamber of Commerce to offer training to small medium enterprises, SMEs. Now, if we look at how the training is delivered at Royal Holloway, and we deliver it mostly online, and we do it in 4 weeks over 2 weekly sessions, and that gives us the day's worth of carbon literacy training. And as I said, the focus is very much on the solutions, as well as looking at the issues. So it involves the organizational side and the individual side, look at carbon footprints, high impact solutions, and then take into account climate justice, who is vulnerable, who is responsible, and where is that mismatch then. We look at what will the future look like if we don't take climate action, and what will the future look like if we do take climate action. We do cover the climate science in a short session, and most of us who are delivering the training, and that includes me, and then colleagues from drama and theatre, as well as earth sciences and the library. Most of us are not climate scientists, and it's really important to have a basic understanding of what it is. And in the final session, we talk about system thinking. What are the co-benefits? What other problems do we solve when we take climate action? And for me, one of the most rewarding things in providing the training is that it's taken by staff and students together, and involves academics and professional services in the same room, which is reflective of the climate crisis. We're all in this together. In terms of our ratio, we've got about a third of participants are staff, then about 60% are students, and we always have some externals joining the training, and that for us is part of our external engagement and sharing good practice. So over the 4 years, we've just finished our 10th cohort. I'm just collecting evidence forms for over 460 sign-ups, over 300 learners that have engaged and are therefore eligible. They've attended 3 or 4 of the 4 sessions, and 200 have been certified. And hopefully by the end of the summer, that will be about 230. And often we have staff that are on paper carbon literate, know about climate change, whether it's the director for research in various schools or the research centre director for our Centre for Research into Sustainability or the Living Sustainability Research Catalyst. But this is all about putting it into action and making changes in our working lives individually as a group. And a couple of years ago, the team who started the training actually won a team teaching commendation for our inclusive, impactful, and extracurricular offering of carbon literacy training. In terms of what's needed for the certificate, if you go to the next slide, it's an evidence form with 3 questions. The big picture, what are the most important changes we need to make as a society to reach zero carbon? It's about 100 to 200 words. So it's really about understanding the overarching picture. And what the training is meant to do is break this down, because often that can be overwhelming, can lead to eco-anxiety. So I quite like the example of Manchester. How can you offer a calming space and enable action? That's really the focus. And then it's 2 pledges for your individual action and your group action. How is that significant and new? So you're not continuing already what you're doing in climate action, but you're starting to do something new. And then you submit the evidence, which is then assessed by the Carbon Literacy Project, which gives you the certificate. And I think the next picture will show us a picture of that. And I'm really pleased to say that as of last week, I'm also a certified carbon literacy trainer based on the over 15 courses I've offered, not just to the university, but also externally to theatres, churches, and climate NGOs. And so for the first time, what we did earlier this month is also offer it in person to our global engagement team and marketing and communications. So that was an all-day event with a slightly different energy from our online offering. But I'll now hand over to Maria, who's going to talk about sort of the library. And I'll just have to say, sort of working with the library on carbon literacy training has been an absolute delight. And I can say, sort of after 15 years at Royal Holloway, carbon literacy training is definitely one of the best things I've done. And I've been really pleased and privileged to work with colleagues from the library who've helped organize it, facilitate it, and lots of action has come out of that. But over to you, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you, Sigrun. Thank you for your kind words as well. I have to say, I am by no means an expert in sustainability, but every time I facilitate courses with Sigrun, I'm actually learning something new, which is amazing. So carbon literacy training in the library. So about a third of library staff have actually attended the carbon literacy training courses, and out of those, just under 2/3 have been certified. So it's about 20% of library staff. So, and this is so far, that is. Now, what does this mean for the library, the staff, and sort of beyond the library? The main thing is we're raising awareness amongst the library staff, and we encourage staff to attend. So we're spreading the word around to non-attendees within the library and the cultural services team. We started discussions on the next steps. What do we do as a service with regards to carbon literacy and sustainability? We're committed to a number of personal initiatives, which I'm going to come on to a second. And then, obviously, like Sigrun mentioned, a few of us are actually regular facilitators at the carbon literacy training courses at Royal Holloway. Now, one of our most recent projects that came out of staff attending carbon literacy training is our books processing review from our acquisitions and content delivery team. So what our ACD team did, they're launching a 12-month pilot where they're looking to cease covering books in plastic, and they replace book plates with branded barcodes. This also is supporting our HUL 2030's strategic enabler sustainability goals, and kind of reflects generally the growing interest within the sector. Our team has consulted with other universities, and they have already made this change. They don't have any concerns about the durability of this kind of project, and it does actually save a cost within the region of 2 to 3.5K per year. The next initiative was creating a carbon literacy training reading list. So one of my lovely colleagues, Eva, who attended the training a while ago, and she's also a facilitator, has created this reading list, which has proven quite popular and useful, both for attendees of the course and for those who just wanted to find out more about certain topics within sort of the carbon literacy training sessions. In addition to that, and I have to actually say this, quite a few colleagues that have attended have spoken about how this is a great opportunity to learn through various discussions with other colleagues within the course, as we break into breakout rooms and sort of talk about carbon literacy and what it means for us. And they have reported that it's actually giving you a right balance between the urgency that is required to limit climate change, and also how important this is to be kind of positive. Library colleagues have worked together to create a carbon literacy book display in the library, as you can see in this photo. We've actually created a couple of well-being areas within our library spaces, and we have organized a library environmental sustainability conference, which is happening in a couple of days' time, with a number of internal and external speakers and a day of activities that focus around environmental sustainability, just to raise that awareness within the whole team. In terms of carbon literacy individual actions, what our participants, library participants, have actually reported they've done some of the most sort of common popular actions: reduction of meat consumption within their sort of personal lives. As we mentioned already, a few of us have become carbon literacy training facilitators. We have committed in raising awareness as much as possible. Some of us launched carbon literacy training in our local communities and sort of church groups. We created a library sustainability working group in the library, with the chair of the group being, I believe, one of the first library colleagues who actually attended the carbon literacy training. And I believe she's here with us today. So she's doing amazing work with the working group. A few of our colleagues are purchasing second-hand items. Some have reported they changed banks because of the way they fund fossil fuel projects. They decided to walk and cycle more to and from work. They have started initiatives as swapping books and pre-loved items. Some of them actually replaced diesel cars with electric, and one of them recently reported they installed solar panels in their house. Now, finally, in terms of the course carbon literacy bringing people together, we've noticed that it does bring people together from within the university, professional services staff, academic staff, and students, as well as attendees from the local community, sort of coming together and pledging to commit to reduce their carbon footprint, both on an individual basis, departmental basis, working across the organization, and also involving community attendees. So I'm going to pass on to Singran just to say a final couple of things at this point.
Thank you. If you can click one more, then I think we get sort of the arrow. It's just of the sharing of ideas and the actions and the implementation. I think for me, sort of particularly that link to that previous slide is sort of breaking it down to what we can do at work, but also in our personal lives. And that's certainly very important to me and my integrity as a sustainability educator, that I'm not just talking about it, but I'm actually walking the talk. And I think that really is sort of sort of at the heart of competency training, making it possible for people to act in whichever context. So if you do have a car, can you swap it at the end of its life? Or, you know, if you eat a lot of meat, can you reduce that? If you're a vegetarian already, what other things can you do? So I'm a vegetarian, but I'm sort of increasingly moving towards I wouldn't call myself a vegan, but I've cut out more of dairy and eggs in the last year, certainly. So it's all about what can you do in your context, in your situation, and that's been really good to see some of the ideas, the actions, and the implementation, and also the spirit of sort of, yeah, we can do this together at the university. So we'll finish off with the last slide. I think that's a picture of one of our solar panels on the engineering building. So thank you very much, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you from me as well.
Thank you so much. I'd just like to welcome all our panelists back onto the screen, if that's okay. Thank you. And we're going to open up for questions. I'm going to be very cheeky and just start first with my question. That's the joy of being the chair. I was really interested. I mean, there's such amazing work happening at the moment, and we know that that's happening in a really constrained financial environment. And I just wondered whether you'd seen that have an impact on your work. And I think Olivia, you were saying that you managed to get pockets of money from other parts of the university. But are you seeing any kind of decline in funding coming this way, or having to argue harder, or any kind of hints and tips that you could suggest to other people in other libraries who are trying to kind of get the resources to implement these types of projects? I don't know who would like to start.
I don't mind sort of maybe picking it up from, like you say, reference to what I touched on. I think it is, you know, I think actually from my perspective, some of it is about taking those opportunities where there is, I think where there is a university central goal to achieve something, is like, yeah, looking at where you can join in the stuff that's going on across campus, where there already is an intention, is just making sure you're there at the forefront, saying, you know, the library is, again, it's about that role the library can play and taking a really central role and actually leading the way in some of these things. And we're often, I think, across most libraries, often keen to do things that are perhaps innovative or take some more risks. And I think it's making sure you've got your hand up first where those pots of money are, and you can dip into them. That's certainly how the approach I think we've taken. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I don't know if anybody's got anything else to add, or.
I think just to say what Maria was saying about the plastic covers, you know, seeing also where that has an opportunity for cost savings, and so, you know, there are instances where sort of the carbon reduction does come attached with a cost, but then there are chances to save costs as well.
Really good point. Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to pick up some questions now from the Q&A. So the first one was for you, Michelle. Which is, how many staff are in LCCOS? And then how many staff are in the sustainability group?
Okay, yes. With LCOS, we do seem to like long job titles and long department names at UCL. Yeah, the Sustainability Committee, which I chair, we're currently 32 members. They come from all different sites. Each site has a representative, sometimes two representatives. Also, we have on the team Colette Lawrence, who is from the LCOS Projects and Estates team, and also a guy called Dan Hall, who is part of Sustainable UCL, so the central department at UCL that sort of looks at sustainability across the board. So it's one of the ways that we link into the central strategy, and again, mentioning like sort of pots of money and so on that we can look at. Although it's 32 people, sometimes small groups will get together to perhaps trying to look at individual projects, like a sustainability reading for pleasure list, rather than also the academic ones that we produce. And in a way, it's even bigger than that in a sense, because often a site might have one or two representatives on the committee, but they will go back and they'll be involving the whole of their site, particularly if they're involved with the green impact. And we pick up ideas from people who also aren't on the committee. I think that's important to say. We try and advertise who we are. So anyone has any ideas, however big or small, let us know.
Right. Lovely, thank you. And I should have said, sorry, that's from Nicola Cockerill from Royal Holloway. Thank you. And a second question for you, Michelle, which was, did you have a detailed criteria for the weed of books prior to your clearing?
There was indeed. This, in terms of writing the criteria, was led by Dan O'Connor, who's the subject liaison coordinator for Institute of Education Library, with his team of subject liaison librarians. But was also, they included Ros Evans, who's the head of collection strategy in LCOS. And in terms of that criteria, some of which I think what you expect, yes, it was based on usage, but also rarity, what current courses, programs UCL is running, some deduplication with some other sites, but also the subject knowledge of the individual subject liaison librarians. So although many reports were run from, say, like ALMA, our library management system, and also looking at external catalogues, it was also put through the subject liaison librarians as well. But if any more information on that, please get in contact, and I can put you in contact with Dan.
Thank you. And this is a more generic question, but it's, I think Claire was asking, is there any concern, or do you take any precaution? So, you know, some of these projects are talking about really kind of greening those library spaces. So when you're thinking about using plants in those spaces, is there any concerns around kind of bugs, insects, and particularly in relation to the library stock, the book stock?
I think certainly with the UCL, the libraries, I suppose in some ways we do a certain amount of monitoring, as sort of if you're looking after them. Within a space, not all the space is the same. Like in the library, I'm seeing School of Pharmacy today, not every part of it has plants in it. In terms of bugs, I think the closest we came to is one office where it was a donated plant. There were these little flies that went around. I think it was more annoying for the staff in terms of eating. We did try clay pellets, but that didn't work. So the plant had to, I'm afraid, had to be composted. But when we come to things like our special collections or our museums, for them, of course, it's they might be less likely to green up their spaces internally as much as we might do with some of the libraries.
Olivia, have you considered that?
Yeah, I mean, as in terms of the building project I'm talking about, that's actually a self-contained space with no stock in it whatsoever. So that's, you know, I think what we've done around the library is tended to, yeah, use those spaces without stock in it. We do have also, though, our library plant suppliers, and they do maintenance. So there's someone coming in constantly to look at them, so they are looked after, which avoids the whole thing of we have to have a rule that you can't even bring your own plants into those same spaces because they might contaminate the ones that are managed. But it means it is well looked after, and our collection care team as well would keep close eye on it. But yeah, generally I think it's trying to keep, yeah, those spaces that are maybe more study spaces without the stock in is where we're looking mostly at putting those sort of green things in. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And I wonder, Maria and Sigrun, if I could ask, so you talked a little bit about the benefits of having a kind of mixed group in the carbon literacy training, so staff and students, and then different types of staff, professional services, academic services. I wondered if you were able to talk a little bit more about what you really kind of felt the benefits of that are coming into that discussion, having those different voices.
Yeah, I can start with that, and then Maria, you can add to that. I think so. Often the students come up with the idea. It's often really creative, and then academics might provide the critique or additional ideas, and it's the professional services staff who will often have to implement them, operationalize the environmental sustainability strategies. So they come with a this is doable, this is realistic, and actually getting new ideas on board as well. So, you know, for example, we're now introducing carbon labeling across all of our food outlets, catering, on campus, and I'm not sure whether that's as a direct result of carbon literacy, but certainly as part of that wider picture of the environmental sustainability strategic enabler. And it's really good that sort of people are asking for it and thinking about it, and providing vegetarian-only catering as well. So I think there's some really great ideas that are coming out of that. Also, for example, with AI. So when I trained the marketing team, they're thinking, okay, what can we do also with our marketing materials, all of the emails? So yeah, it's really wide ranging. And I think we wouldn't have that breadth of ideas and energy and enthusiasm if we only had one group. Although, so I'm really pleased that Helen put in the chat about the dedicated archives, records, and special collections CLT. And I'd be really interested to talk to the library and see, is this of interest, and then maybe compare notes. How does it work with a universal HE training kit and doing it just for the library? And is there enough traction then? Do we have enough people? Because you need a sort of minimum number to make it really, to have that enthusiasm and the dynamism.
Yeah, that's so true, actually, Sigrun. And also, just to mention that I am attending some catering steering group meetings within Royal Holloway, and the discussion actually on sustainability and carbon literacy has become quite massive. And the course has raised awareness quite a lot across Royal Holloway, even with colleagues who haven't actually attended the course yet, but they talk about sustainability and they talk about carbon literacy. And like I said, we are organizing an environmental sustainability conference in a couple of days. And actually, the most interest so far is coming from people who want to learn more and haven't attended carbon literacy training yet. So it does cut across a lot of sort of different areas. And just as a personal reflection, when I was facilitating one of the groups, last year, I think it was, I had in my breakout room students, professional services staff, academics, and I had a couple of external participants as well. And the ideas were flowing. Everyone was talking about what they could do from their own point of view, which was amazing. So raising awareness is actually probably the first step to sort of actions, really. And in terms of the plans that within the library that you mentioned earlier, when we created our well-being areas, and I'm saying we, but our amazing customer services colleagues have done all of the work on this, and they have done quite extensive research on what plants to use within the library that would not affect the stock in the library.
Great, thank you. It feels like a very real librarian concern. Yeah. I wondered, Michelle, if I could ask, I was quite taken with the fact that you've got sustainability in all of your new job descriptions that are coming through. And I wondered, how does that kind of manifest itself on a kind of daily basis within the team? Is it directly linked to PDRs or?
It's one line that we have in all job descriptions, sort of under this sort of the area where you might mention about health and safety and so on to be concerned about. I think firstly, just even having it there means it highlights that there is a sustainability strategy, and as a department, it's something that we do care about. In terms of our appraisal systems, we don't have it specifically linked into that. We've got a new appraisal system actually that's kicked in this year. I think that's actually a very good point actually about something whether we should think about that. In terms of how it manifests itself, I think it comes perhaps through the Local Sustainability Committee, and certainly so each site has at least one representative on it, and certainly when we have new members of teams starting, even I think just the walk around the libraries, things we pointed out to them, and the work that we do with the students as well, and get people involved.
And I think it's probably our final question, if that's okay, because we're getting close to the end of time, but to all of you. So you've all talked about the benefits of kind of sustainability and really kind of thinking positively about sustainability and the initiatives you're doing around more sustainable spaces and the benefits to well-being. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you measure that, how you measure whether what you're doing is having the success that you need. If you're seeing that kind of, if there's a way of measuring that coming through the positive impact on well-being. Sorry, it's a bit of a killer last question, but genuinely interested.
I don't mind again saying something
Thank
here.
you.
In terms of, it is one of the things we've struggled with most. So we set up the Sustainability Steering Group, say, about a year and a half ago. We came up with an action plan. We had lots of things we thought would be exciting to do, we were able to do. And then it's like, how do we prove that these are the right things to focus on and they're actually having the impact that we want them to? And so that's been the sort of latter part of the work we've done this year. I talked a little bit about the levers we'd started to use. So this was looking at those particular levers, and actually that I have a wheel of levers, different ones that we can look, and we made the group sit down and really think about everything on our action plan and which lever it met, and if it met a certain lever, yeah, whether we could then look at a measure. And they're not all like data led. They're not necessarily, often you're not able to get anything that tangible that says, okay, it's done this and it's done that. But where possible, we might say, this is where we are at the moment with something, and this is where we're going to aim to get to in 6 months' time. And that could either be a change that's just a change that's been made that we know in context will have an impact on CO2 emissions, or it will be a numbers thing. So again, if with travel, it might be we look at reducing a certain number. But yeah, I think those measures things, the measures is really certainly become more and more important to us, because there's an awful lot you can do, and it's about really assessing where the proper impact is. So yeah, I suppose I'm saying I think it's a really important point. Not sure we've got it completely nailed yet, but yeah, I think it's it's one of those things we do need to focus on.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else wanted to comment on that or come in.
I think Sag's absolutely great. It's incredibly difficult with measuring some of this, and although I know there's sort of investigations going on, something that really struck me, I think it was John Ray, I think from the Oxford University, I heard him do a presentation, I think it was the Green Libraries Conference, where he said about, the difficulties, for example, with our digital carbon footprint. What is that? But we know there is a digital carbon footprint, so we mustn't get too hung up on what it actually is measuring it. We know there's one, so we just got to try to do some things to mitigate it until we get to a point where maybe we can measure it.